Johnny Carson was interviewing Tom Selleck when a young woman in the third row stood up and did something that stopped the entire Tonight Show. What happened next broke every rule of live television and left 12 million viewers in tears. It was February 12, 1981 at NBC's Burbank Studios. Johnny Carson was in peak form that evening bantering with Tom Selleck about his new show Magnum P.I. when something unusual caught his attention during a pause for laughter. A young woman in the third row, seat C, had stood up in the controlled environment of a Tonight Show taping, where audiences are carefully coached on when to laugh and when to stay seated. This was highly unusual. But what made Johnny pause wasn't just that she was standing. It was a look on her face, a mixture of hope, fear, and desperate determination that even from stage, he could clearly see. 24-year-old Sarah Mitchell knew she was breaking protocol. She knew the audience coordinators would probably escort her out. She knew she might be embarrassing herself on national television. But when you have 3 weeks left to live, embarrassment becomes irrelevant. Sarah had been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia 2 years earlier, just 3 months after graduating from UCLA with a degree in journalism. She'd fought through 2 rounds of chemotherapy, a bone marrow transplant, and countless experimental treatments. But 3 days ago, on February 9th, her oncologist at Cedars-Sinai had told her family there was nothing more they could do. 3 weeks, Dr. Raymond Chen had said, unable to meet her parents' eyes. Maybe a month if we're lucky. I'm so sorry. Sarah had taken the news with surprising calm. She'd known for months that her body was losing the battle. What surprised her family was what she said next. I want to go to a Tonight Show taping, she told her mother, Patricia. I want to see Johnny Carson in person just once. Patricia Mitchell had thought it was an odd final request. Most people wanted to see the Grand Canyon or Hawaii or spend time with family. But Sarah had been watching Johnny Carson every night since her diagnosis. In the loneliness of hospital rooms and the fear of sleepless nights, Johnny's monologue had been her companion, his laughter her escape. He makes me forget I'm dying, Sarah had explained. For 30 minutes every night, I'm just a person watching TV, laughing at jokes. Not a patient, not a dying girl, just Sarah. Getting tickets on 3 days' notice had seemed impossible. But Patricia Mitchell was a woman on a mission. She called the Tonight Show's audience line 17 times in one day until she reached a coordinator named Linda, who upon hearing the situation had said, "Hold on, don't hang up." 10 minutes later, Linda had returned to the phone. "I'm not supposed to do this, but I have 3 seats for Thursday's taping. 3rd row, center section. Can you get here by 4 o'clock p.m.? Now." Here Sarah was standing in the middle of Johnny Carson's show, about to do something that would either be the bravest or most foolish thing she'd ever done. Johnny had stopped mid-sentence, one eyebrow raised in that signature expression that had launched 1,000 impressions. Are you okay, miss?" he asked, half smiling, thinking perhaps she needed to use a restroom or felt ill. Sarah's voice was quiet but steady. "Mr. Carson, I'm so sorry to interrupt. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm dying of leukemia. I have about 3 weeks left." She paused, fighting tears. "I know this is crazy, but I have a dream that I thought was impossible. And when you're dying, impossible doesn't seem like a good enough reason not to try." The studio had gone completely silent. Tom Selleck sat frozen in his chair. The audience seemed to collectively hold its breath. Even Ed McMahon, who'd seen everything in 20 years beside Johnny, looked stunned. Johnny's smile had faded. He stood up from his desk and walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at this young woman who was clearly very ill. Even under the studio makeup she'd carefully applied, he could see the pale, waxy complexion of someone in the late stages of cancer. Her arms visible in her dress were thin as rails. "What's your dream, Sarah?" Johnny asked quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the silent studio. Sarah took a deep breath. "I dream about dancing. Before I got sick, I loved to dance. I haven't danced in 2 years because I've been too weak. But every night I watch your show and I imagine what it would be like to dance with you just once. Just one dance before." She couldn't finish the sentence. Johnny stood at the edge of the stage looking at this dying young woman. For once in his career, he didn't have a joke ready. His face showed the internal struggle. The professional broadcaster versus the human being confronted with mortality. "Sarah," He said finally, "We're in the middle of taping. We have a schedule. Commercial breaks are timed." He stopped, seeing her face fall. What happened next happened so fast that the producers in the booth didn't have time to react. Johnny looked to his left to his musical director and said simply, "Doc, can you give me something slow?" Doc Severson, who'd been Johnny's musical director for 14 years and had never seen him deviate from a script, didn't hesitate. "What do you want, Johnny? The way you look tonight, can you do it for you, boss?" "Anything." Johnny turned back to Sarah. "I'm not much of a dancer, but if you're willing to risk your toes, come on up here." The audience erupted in applause, but it wasn't the usual Tonight Show applause. It was the kind of applause people give when they're witnessing something sacred, something that transcends entertainment. Two stage hands helped Sarah up the stairs to the stage. She was trembling, partly from emotion and partly from physical weakness. When Sarah reached the stage, she was face to face with Johnny Carson, the man who'd comforted her through countless dark nights. She started crying. Hey, Johnny said softly, taking her hand. "No tears. Dancing is supposed to be fun." As Doc Severson and the band began playing The Way You Look Tonight, Johnny took Sarah's hand and placed his other hand gently on her back. She was so thin he was afraid he might hurt her. They began to move slowly across the stage. Sarah was unsteady on her feet, weakened by years of treatment and the cancer consuming her body. But in that moment, in Johnny Carson's arms, with the band playing and 12 million people watching, she wasn't dying. She was dancing. Johnny kept up a quiet stream of gentle conversation as they moved, trying to put her at ease. "You know, my first wife made me take dancing lessons," he said. "I was terrible. The instructor told her she should get her money back." Sarah laughed through her tears. "You're doing fine, Mr. Carson. Call me Johnny, and you're the one doing fine. I'm just trying not to step on your feet." The song seemed to last both forever and not nearly long enough. Tom Selleck, watching from his chair, found himself wiping away tears. Ed McMahon was openly crying. The audience sat in absolute silence, many of them sobbing quietly. When the song ended, Johnny didn't immediately let go of Sarah. He held her steady as she wavered slightly, exhausted from even that small amount of exertion. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." Johnny looked at this brave young woman who'd stood up in the middle of his show, who'd risked humiliation to ask for one last beautiful moment, and he found himself speechless. Finally, he managed. "No, Sarah, thank you for reminding me what really matters." He helped her back to her seat, personally, making sure she was steady before returning to the stage. When he got back to his desk, he looked directly into the camera and said something that would be quoted for decades to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we'll finish the show. But I want you to know that what just happened here, that was real. That was life. Everything else we do is just television." The show continued, but everyone in the studio knew they'd witnessed something extraordinary. When the taping ended, Johnny didn't go straight to his dressing room, as he usually did. Instead, he went into the audience and sat with Sarah and her family for 45 minutes just talking. Sarah asked him about his Nebraska childhood. Johnny asked her about her journalism degree, her life before the illness. Patricia Mitchell watched her daughter laugh and smile in a way she hadn't seen in months. Before they left, Johnny did something that his staff would later say was completely out of character. He gave Sarah his private phone number. "If you need anything," he said, "and I mean anything day or night, you call me, okay?" Sarah died 26 days later on March 10th, 1981. But those weren't the 3 weeks of decline her doctors had predicted. Those were 26 days of vitality that no one could explain. She watched the Tonight Show episode when it aired on February 19th, surrounded by friends and family who'd all heard about her dance with Johnny Carson. She'd received hundreds of letters from viewers who'd been moved by what they had witnessed. But what no one knew, except for Sarah's family, was that Johnny Carson called her 3 times during those 26 days. Not publicized calls, not for show, just quiet conversations between a famous entertainer and a young woman dying of cancer. "He asked about my day." Sarah told her mother after the first call. "Can you believe it? Johnny Carson wanted to know about my day. During their last conversation, 3 days before Sarah died, she told Johnny something that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. "I got to dance. I got to really live, even if it was just for a few minutes. Most people go their whole lives without a moment like that. I got mine." Johnny had to end the call quickly because he couldn't speak through his tears. At Sarah's funeral, Patricia Mitchell was surprised to see a large arrangement of white roses with a card that read simply, "For the bravest dancer I ever knew, Johnny." What happened after Sarah's death became legendary in television history. Johnny Carson, who is notoriously private about his personal life and charitable work, quietly established the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Young Adult Cancer Patients. The foundation focused on granting wishes and providing support for patients aged 18 to 30, a demographic often overlooked by children's wish foundations. The Tonight Show never aired another episode without Johnny thinking about Sarah Mitchell. His staff noticed a change in him after that night. He was more patient with guests who were nervous. He paid more attention to the audience, really looking at the faces. He seemed to understand in a way he hadn't before that every person in that studio had a story, a struggle, a dream. Doc Severinsen later said after Sarah, Johnny became more human on camera. He'd always been brilliant, but that night taught him that sometimes breaking the rules and following your heart was more important than maintaining perfect television. The footage of Johnny dancing with Sarah became one of the most requested clips in Tonight Show history. NBC was initially reluctant to rear it, worried about the emotional content, but the public demanded it, and when it was eventually released as part of a Tonight Show retrospective in 1989, it won an Emmy for Most Outstanding Moment in Television History. Today, the Sarah Mitchell Foundation has granted over 8,000 wishes to young adult cancer patients. Every year on February 12th, the foundation holds a gala where cancer survivors and their families gather to celebrate life and remember Sarah. The theme of every gala is the same. One dance, one moment, one chance to really live. Johnny Carson died in 2005, but in his will, he left a substantial portion of his estate to the Sarah Mitchell Foundation. Included with the donation was a personal letter that read, "Sarah taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop the show. Because life isn't happening in the scheduled programming. It's happening in the moments between the jokes, in the courage of people who stand up and ask for what seems impossible, and in the decision to say yes when every professional instinct says no." There's a plaque in the lobby of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation's headquarters in Los Angeles. It reads, February 12, 1981, the night Johnny Carson reminded us all that compassion is worth more than any punchline. That night on The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson broke every rule of television production. He stopped the taping. He abandoned his script. He let personal emotion onto a program known for polished professionalism. And in doing so, he gave a dying young woman the most beautiful 3 minutes of her life, reminded 12 million viewers what truly matters, and created a moment of television that continues to move people to tears more than 4 decades later. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't following the rules. It's knowing when to break them for something that matters more than any show, any rating, any schedule. Sarah Mitchell asked for the impossible, and Johnny Carson said yes. And that one word, yes, changed everything. If this incredible story of compassion and human connection moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of saying yes when someone asks for the impossible. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone broke all the rules to help another person? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories that remind us what it means to be truly